this time around we're going to be looking at Anomalisa, which is a 2016 animated movie, stop-motion animation, co-directed by Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson.
Did you see it? First of all, did you see this at the cinema?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, when I was watching it, that was one of my quick reactions, almost from the outset, was that I'd wish I'd seen it on a bigger screen than the screen I have at home.
Curzon Artificial Eye picked it up here, so I guess it would have been showing a lot of their cinemas, and I can't really blame the distribution that much, but no, I didn't get to see it in the cinema, and I wish I had as well.
Yeah.
I picked it up on disc when it came out, because I knew that I really, really wanted to see it, and yeah, same as you, I kind of regretted not doing that.
There's a few films, isn't there, that you see, and straight away you miss that big screen impression.
So is this the first time you've seen it recently, or have you seen it before?
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen it before. I watched it for this, and I watched it 2 days in a row. So I watched it, and then just didn't make any notes, just kind of let it wash over me, and then watched it again and made copious notes. It's I feel like I could probably watch it again and again, and maybe a couple more times. It's so detailed and yet kind of so effortless. It's a really clever piece of cinema. It ticks all the boxes, doesn't it?
Yeah, I kind of watched it on disc when it first came out, like the day it arrived, eagerly watched it and really enjoyed it, and then kind of forgot about it ever since. It's always been, that was really good. And then we sort of decided to do it for this, and I did the same thing. I just kind of put it on with a pen and paper, but I just kind of was spellbound for the whole thing. That's and found at the end that I'd made no notes. So then I went to do some research and realised that not only did I need to watch it again to make some notes of my own, that I needed to watch it again in the context of all the things I'd learned about the background of it and everything, and what it's about. So then I watched it a third time. Yeah,
that's it. You kind of have to get the first viewing out of the way, don't you? The viewing where you don't know what's going to happen, the surprises and, the surprises in technique and character and all of these things that happen. You need to get that first viewing out of the way so you can go back and really kind of enjoy the complexity of it.
And I felt I had to go back and see some more Charlie Kaufman. Obviously, I've kept up with all of his films as they've come out, but his output's been so sparse. Those 7 years between Schenectady, New York, and this, and then a further 3 years since this has come out, that I'd kind of remembered all his films very, very favourably, but not any significant detail about them.
Yeah.
So after this, I went back and watched Adaptation again and Schenectady, New York, the latter of which has gone in my mind from being that was very, very good to being that's a legitimate masterpiece of cinema.
Yeah, I haven't rewatched it. I put it on my Amazon watch list after watching this just to kind of catch up on it.
Oh, it's phenomenal. I think the sort of surface and structural cleverness is what you get the first time around, but second time around it was just devastating. It was really, really upsetting, especially towards the end. Anyway, back to this.
Do you know much about the creation of the project? The backstory on the sound play?
Yeah, it started out as a short sound play, which was sort of commissioned by the composer Carter Burwell. It was called Theatre of the New Year. It showed in New York, London and LA. It had the actors reading the lines on stage with an orchestra and Foley artist, so it was quite literally a sound play. There was initially 2 plays in the lineup: Hope Leaves the Theatre by Kaufman and Sawbones by the Coen brothers. And apparently scheduling conflicts meant that Sawbones was replaced by a new play, Anomalisa, which was written by a Francis Fragoli, which was a pseudonym for Kaufman, and it had the same cast as feature in the movie.
Yeah, I read something about them. Tom Noonan was in the middle, so Tom Noonan voices every other character in the play and in the film, with the exception of David Thewlis and Jennifer Jason Leigh's characters, and they were sat on opposite sides of the stage, and Tom Noonan was in the middle, so they were talking about the love scene halfway through, and they were making their kind of noises, and it's all bouncing across the stage. It just sounds, like a really interesting evening. Sounds like really fun, actually, just to sort of sit there and watch it in that kind of state of your eyes giving you one thing and your ears and your mind doing something else completely different. I think that's quite fun.
It's annoying that it. I guess we wouldn't have seen this one in London, would we? Because it's only LA. There was the conflicts, but it's annoying that this entire show completely passed me by because I'm somewhat culturally disconnected. I would have had the opportunity to see it. But a friend of Kaufman's was in the audience for the Anomalisa performance. Dino Stamatopoulos, who's a TV comedy writer and producer.
Okay.
and he suggested to him that he turn it into something visual. He'd founded Starburn Studios, who do animation, including a show called Moral Oral, which is one of the shows that Duke Johnson animated.
Oh, okay.
So between them they put together a Kickstarter which raised about $400,000 to make a 40-minute short, and then additional funding was secured off the back of that to turn it into a feature. Duke Johnson, the animation director, and Kaufman made and edited an animatic, and then the actual stop-motion animation shoot took 2 years. There's a lot of stuff on the disc for this. There's a lot of little featurettes which are really, really useless because they're produced as if they're little promotional featurettes with uplifting music and
Meet Mike.
Yeah. And they literally last for about 30 seconds each. But there's a really good Q&A shot at the Curzon Soho, which answers a lot of questions about it. And I didn't realise, or was kind of stunned about how sophisticated animation can be. I guess once you're working on something, pre-visualizing it in the computer, you can use that to create everything right down to the performance aspects of the puppets, because they use 3D printing to create the puppets for
It's
these.
so nice that effect, as you see frame by frame, the gentle shimmer across the skin is really nice, really disarming.
I mean, you can see they do kind of play down in the production stuff how much retouching and digital work there was done. But again, the fact that you can do that now, the fact that
it's
you
just
can
a clean
animate,
up, isn't it? It's not like
exactly.
a criticism. It's just cleaning up the
and
film.
they do make a point of saying that the animatic didn't actually dictate the performance. They just used that for the structure of the film and for the length of shots and cut points.
Did they record the voices first?
Yes, they did.
So they had that, layered the animatic over the voices, and then animated using the animatic as a guide.
Yeah, but they didn't use the animatic because you can go as far as you want with an animatic in terms of pre-visualizing. You can do it to actually choose the facial expressions that you want and the combinations. So they didn't go that far. So what they did was made a set range of expressions.
Oh, okay.
And printed those out, and then you just used those as your selection whilst you're actually hand animating.
Mm-hmm.
So it was properly stop motion animated.
Yeah.
It wasn't kind of like just reproducing the animatic
I see,
slavishly.
Yeah, it works, the technique. I think there's something, like I say, the first time I just sank into the film and wasn't paying any attention to the craftsmanship behind it, but there's a real pleasure watching it once with a slight detachment from the story and just enjoying the details of the animation, like the sets. It's not like those big elaborate Thunderbird sets or something like that, just to do a kind of hotel bar, and it's not lit like a traditional stop motion animation would be, like Isle of Dogs or those kind of movies. It's really lit like a small independent feature film. In this kind of budget range of sort of 5 to 8 million. It has that sort of softness of photography.
I think one of the most upsetting things about the fact that this film bombed and sank without a trace is that it didn't lead on to more films like this. I mean, I like kind of splashy animation. I do like your Isle of Dogs, and I loved Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, it's great.
But that's kind of, it's animated animals, isn't it? Whereas what I liked about this was that it was just everyday stuff. Played out at the same pace of but it's because it's animated. It's got this strange. It's got, I wouldn't say magical, but it's got this quality that keeps you interested.
Yeah, it's really intense, I think.
Yeah.
Especially because it's played so human. That they don't make any kind of point of them being puppets, with the exception of, I think there's been a lot written about the lines around the face and his detachable jaw and the kind of the puppetry elements of it, but the fact that the puppets are so lifelike and human looking, especially when you see them naked, you see this kind of shape and dimples, and it's a really interesting distinction between like the very human form of the bodies with the dimples and the sort of paunches and all and scars and all of that kind of stuff, with sort of very obvious puppetry of the faces. I think it would have been fun to be at the theatre performance to see the Foley artist at work as well. I don't know if there's any clips of that on the Blu-ray, but
no, I don't know if there's any recordings made of the. Apparently, there's some audio recordings made of some of the plays, but I don't think this one was recorded. Apparently Kaufman was reluctant to adapt it at first because he thought a lot of the ambiguities of the play would be lost. It was originally written so that part of the experience of it would be seeing these sort of lines played out and these intimacies performed without any actual physical intimacy on stage. Yeah, part of the strangeness of it being watching these performers sat on either side of the stage. So I guess, as anyone who's seen it knows, it's performed by a cast of stop-motion puppets, all of whom, with the exception of the lead characters Michael and Lisa, who are played by David Thewlis and Jennifer Jason Leigh, all of them are made up of identical-looking and sounding puppet people with only slight variations of hair and dress.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a nice trick that you get by the time he leaves the airport. You've sort of got it, and I think there's a really nice thing where he looks at his iPod and he puts on Dame Joan Bakewell, and it's the same voice going like duh, 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 duh. There's loads of little details like that, which I think it's surprising because it's a film. It can be quite melancholic. The lead character's quite depressive, bit of a misanthrope, and I think it still manages to keep some humour in there. You're sort of giggling, sometimes nervously, sometimes just the slapstick of it as well. I think it's a really nice balance.
Did you see the background about the Frigoli delusion?
I did, yeah. I read up on that just because there's kind of a gag in there that I liked with him pronouncing the hotel name with his sort of northern English, like Fragole, and then everyone else saying Fragole. I thought that was a really nice touch. But yeah, so the delusion is a belief that different people are in fact a single person who changes appearances. Like it's a sort of like a paranoid delusion, isn't it? And they're saying it's kind of like these delusional misidentification syndromes like schizophrenia or something that's substance abuse or brain injury, or lesions on the front of the brain. That's how it kind of affects your perception, so that perhaps he's suffering from...
Well, I think Kaufman said he's not supposed to be literally suffering from it. It's just like a visual metaphor for
it's a representation of how he sees the world,
how disconnected he is from the world.
I'm sure you know and recognise Tom Noonan's voice.
I do. Well, I know him from lots of things.
Manhunter.
Yeah, it's Thomas Dollarhide.
Yeah.
And he's also fantastic in Synecdoche, New York.
Oh yeah, okay.
He's the actor who comes to play Philip Seymour Hoffman, Caden's character in Caden's play, which then requires another actor to play the Tom Noonan character who's playing Caden.
That's right.
Thing.
He's also in. He plays Kane in RoboCop 2.
Yes.
Frank Miller's Opus.
Yeah, Frank Miller's
Opus Horribilis.
Yeah.
I really like... I mean, I've already said this, but I found it quite disarming that it starts with a huge digital Paramount logo, really big and glossy, and I feel like I was settling into like a Mission Impossible film. And then it just kind of cuts to this black screen, and I was fiddling with the volume on the TV because I wasn't sure if I'd missed something, and then I heard these kind of whispers emerging from the black, and just these, Tom Noonan's voice layered and layered and layered. It's a very unsettling introduction, but I like that, we can go through each shot or sequence in detail, but what I really like about the mastery of these opening 5 or 10 minutes is that it kind of settles you into watching the film. It slows your heart rate, focuses your attention, and you find the pace of the film, and you kind of obey it. And I think that's a really clever thing for a filmmaker to do, is just to kind of settle your mind and your soul into the space that he's crafted.
Yeah. And it kind of establishes your sound design setup as well, because there's quite an unsettling kind of drone underneath those voices, which puts you ill at ease from the very beginning. Yeah, actually, you get to meet Michael Stone, don't you?
Yes. First thing you see, obviously, is this kind of puppet head, and I think the first time you view it, there's a slight disquiet about looking. It's that thing about the uncanny valley and all those kind of different things that you get when you're looking at something that is artificial. And then they spend the next few minutes just kind of building up the reality of the character. There's a really nice gag. Maybe I'm racing ahead a bit, but where the character that's sitting next to him on the plane says, I'm sorry I grabbed your hand, as they're taxiing on the runway. He's like, I'm sorry I grabbed your hand, I get really nervous when I'm flying, etc. And he's like, it's okay, it's fine. He's like, yeah, you can let go now. Such a silly gag, but it really works.
No, but all this stuff on just like a single scene on the plane, it sets up everything kind of dramatically. He's takes a pill and then starts reading the letter from Bella, which automatically kind of is uncomfortable letter, and it puts him in a tricky position.
No, but there is something about him taking the pill and reading a letter, and the voice in his head, it just makes him feel like a character. He feels like a real person.
After a couple of really nice shots, I mean, throughout this, I'm just going to be rabbiting on about how much it makes me want to see normal things done as animation, over and over again.
So
it's just
exquisitely crafted, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not just that. It's the fact that you can show sort of mundane stuff, and it has kind of like, I don't mean magical as in otherworldly, but it just has.
There's a beauty, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a beauty to it that just filming things, real things, figuratively can.
Yeah, and miniaturized as well,
Yeah.
but maximised photographically. Knowing that all of those clothes that they're wearing, all the texture and the embroidery or whatever is all like micro as well. That somebody's sat and hand sewn that stuff, put it together, and the way they shuffle around and they walk kind of. They don't walk normally, but they have all the characteristics of somebody that's, however they're feeling. You can see it in their body language. It's like a super enhanced performance or something.
Yeah, it's all those shots. Just a handful of kind of throwaway shots going through the airport, going on like is it Travelator?
Yeah.
Things? And walking through the airport to get a cab and stuff. It's just like, this is the real world, but through slightly different lenses.
Yeah, it did that airport scene reminded me ever so slightly of the end of Everything Is Illuminated. When Tobey Maguire gets back from his travels and he realises that everybody's connected.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And there's a taxi ride to the hotel. I mean, it seems odd going through this all scene by scene because it's fairly seamless. I did notice watching it the third time that the movie has a really nice, clean 3-act structure. And this first act just kind of flows effortlessly from one thing to another. It doesn't feel like individual scenes. There's a really great bit with the taxi ride with the stupid driver. Stupid and irritating
he's
driver.
An archetype, isn't he? A global archetype.
And Michael clearly not wanting to talk.
There's a really nice sequence where he says he likes, England and all things English.
You're from England, right?
Yeah, I'm from England.
How's the weather there now? Good?
Well, I'm from there originally. I live here now.
In Sin City? As I call it.
Not here, the States.
The States. I like that. Across the pond, the States, the trolley, cheerio, put another shrimp on the barbie. I like all that English stuff.
There's some nice exchanges with the taxi driver that kind of set up some stuff later on. I mean, as you're watching it, you kind of get the giggles of an awkward exchange between somebody that wants to talk and somebody that doesn't want to talk. But the taxi driver does talk about the zoo, the Cincinnati Zoo, being zoo-sized, and that you wouldn't need a whole day to go around it, and that you maybe only would need an hour to eat some Cincinnati chili. And then Michael asks him if there's a toy store. It's a fairly innocuous question, but the taxi driver interprets it as something more lewd and is giving him like a nudge, wink response. And, although the dialogue serves to kind of illustrate the characters, all of those points recur later on as well. So that's how kind of sparse the writing is. I think that's a really nice discipline, that even things that feel throwaway still are pertinent to what plays out later on.
No, it's only this time watching it round that I noticed that the when you get a time lapse, the sun coming up over the hotel view, you get the sign for the zoo
billboard.
saying it's zoo-sized.
Yeah, the billboard goes up, and then later on, Lisa starts talking about the zoo, and that's part of the point where he starts to disengage from her as well.
So we arrive at the Frejoli Hotel.
Frejoli.
The really nice little touch with the receptionist who kind of stares into Michael's face throughout the whole booking process.
Doesn't break his glance, does it?
I really liked. This is just a tiny little aside, but it's kind of typical of how great the animation is. Just his kind of slight flinch when the receptionist at the hotel is just staring into his face as he's taking the booking. He's kind of cut to him. It's kind of like a weird, kind of like, sure, uncomfortable flinch. I thought that was like a really perfect bit of animation.
The second time I watched it with headphones on, and as he's entering the hotel, lots of people are pointing and whispering, going, "It's Michael Stone. That's Michael Stone."
Yeah,
I really like that detail. So he is successful, and because at this point we don't really know how successful he is. He's written the Bible for customer service. And he's there to give a lecture and everybody in the hotel is there to attend his lecture.
Yeah.
It feels like.
But without knowing that, you could also say it just kind of it feels like it's part of his paranoia of
Sure.
world around him. If you wanted to look at it that way.
Yeah, but I think that's why we get those voices before we know who he is.
And then you get something which I guess is, I don't know if it would be easier or harder to do. It's like a single take going from inside the lift through the hallway into his room and then into the bathroom to take a leak.
Yeah, it's a funny kind of trick to pull, isn't it, in an animation, which is essentially hundreds of shots put together to create the effect of a single uninterrupted take drifting through her. It's very like De Palma-y, isn't it?
Yeah, you wonder if it's much more difficult or much easier because you can totally control the environment.
Yeah, that's it. You can just build sets in between frames. And a little bit of forced perspective, it felt like, in the corridor as well, just to sort of bring that in a little bit. Yeah, him taking a piss, I think, is that another one of those points where it's just breaking through the barrier of accepting that this puppet's a character. It's human. Although he doesn't wash his hands. I don't know if you noticed that. Maybe that was too hard to animate.
I mean, it's just one of the little details in the whole of this, I guess, next 10-15 minutes of him just hanging around the hotel room and doing the stuff that you do in a hotel, which I guess would be slightly less interesting were it just live action filmed. But because it's animation, it's quite novel to see these things played out as animation.
Yeah.
It's brilliant observational writing as well, just the little nuances of how Michael says things and how he responds to the blandness of the people on the other end of the phone when he's ordering room service and stuff. Yeah,
I think when we see the telephone, we see all those different options for ordering room service. And I think, is this where we're starting to get an indication of either the world that he inhabits in his mind that is triggering his condition and his detachment? This idea that there's so much choice now, with buying a phone, for example, you can literally spend weeks researching all the different phones just to get this pretty much essentially the same functionality. And the same here where he's ordering room service and the time that he takes to make the choice of which button to push, is that something about how he's seeing the world?
Or it could just be like a dig at there's a lot of kind of subtle digs at how irritating hotel rooms are and hotel service. Could just be like comedy dig at that.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I just think there's something, as the movie's moving forwards, there are clues as to why he is like he is and how he sees the world and how his position in the world has affected his detachment from it. And I'm kind of conscious of looking for those as we go through it.
Yeah. One thing that did make me it made me laugh out loud, it made me almost applaud, was the view from the hotel window, which is exactly like the view from every hotel window I've ever seen whenever I've stayed in America.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of nondescript jumble of nondescript buildings
and people. Yeah,
it's nothing remotely picturesque whatsoever.
Just cityscape, isn't it?
Yeah,
generic cityscape. Yeah, it's very good. And then he phones home.
Yeah, and again I got a great laugh from the son. So, did you buy me something, Daddy? Did you buy me something?
That's the first thing, isn't it? That kind of
grasping son dialogue.
But I like it that he didn't want to speak to. He was like, "Don't put him on, don't put him on." She's like, "Okay, Henry." I say she, again, this is Tom Noonan's voice, but you're starting to buy into this separation between the characters. And I think praise to Tom Noonan for being able to make a distinction between all of those characters.
And he's not
100
He's
characters.
not putting on any voices, but it's just like raising the cadence every now and then.
Yeah, it's not going, "Let me get it for you." He's just literally doing Tom Noonan's voice with a slightly different pitch.
Yeah,
it's really good. And the fact that he does the mother and the son's voice, it's brilliant. It's a real pleasure. But yeah, he doesn't want to speak to his son. He's like, "Don't put him on." He can't be bothered to speak to him, and then he has to switch into gear with that "hello, slugger," like the responsibility of being a father. He'd rather just kind of brush that aside and not have to deal with it in his hotel room.
Yeah, and there's kind of very brief suggestions that things aren't entirely happy at home either, just in the tone of the conversation with his wife.
She makes a joke about Mike thrashing around in bed, and he'll be in the hotel room by himself, so he can just thrash around as much as he likes. But instead of him taking that as a joke, he really bristles at the criticism.
Yeah.
Part of that is to do with the fact that his thrashing about in bed is like a physical externalization of his his subconscious as it's working through the dream state to try and resolve all of these issues that he has with his place in the world. And I think somehow the physical manifestation of that process leaves him a little bit vulnerable. So for her to just kind of make a joke about it and just say, "Oh, you're thrashing about like a madman," whereas in fact he's dealing with all of his internal trauma, and also it's stuff that he doesn't want to talk about with anybody else. He doesn't seem able to articulate it.
What else? I mean, how's your room?
It's, it's a room. It's nice, I guess. Big bed.
Oh, that's good. You can thrash about all you like.
Okay, Donna, it's not that I like it, it's restlessness.
Okay. I'm sorry.
The clues are already there. We've had him reading a breakup letter from a lost love, who is his kind of next phone call, I think.
Yeah, he calls Bella. It's quite interesting that he doesn't recognise her voice. I wonder if that was part of his perception of the world.
It's kind of symptomatic of his delusion, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's kind of lost the ability to distinguish people. Yeah, it's quite. I didn't recognise your voice, he says. But obviously, everybody's got the same voice. It kind of works on. It's sort of bitter and like really amusing at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Again, I've got a note here about Tom Noonan's performance as Bella. I thought it was really quite affecting.
Yeah.
Again, considering it's Tom Noonan just talking like
Exactly.
Tom Noonan.
Yeah,
It's very, very good.
it's a good character. It seems like they had a proper relationship. It wasn't just a fling. When he speaks to her on the phone, he says, "Oh, how long has it been? I don't know, 10 years." And she's like, "No, it's been 11. And she's very precise.
Well, just the wording of their letter suggests that, it was going on for more than one night, wasn't it?
Exactly.
It was, I kind of get the feeling it's like an intense month-long affair or something.
Yeah, there's something deep, and she talks about how deep the connection was. And when we see her, a decade later, it's still pretty raw. It's still pretty on the surface. He's just talking about that there's something wrong with him, and that everything's boring, and that he's kind of just he's lost as well, and he's hoping that reconnecting with her will somehow reignite a spark
passion
he
for
feels.
life,
That's kind of died inside of him. There's so many lovely details in this, but one of the things that she says on the phone was that she'd fallen over and bashed her face on a concrete bench and lost a tooth at the front, and for him not to look at her fake tooth, and then as you're looking at the puppet, you're looking at it trying to see the fake tooth, and it's just popping out under her lip. It's a really nice detail. That's what I was saying, to see it on the cinema, to just kind of look for that false tooth would have been really nice to see it that big.
I think when they go for a drink, I think this is the first time that I've, obviously apart from Michael, that really, really appreciated how careful the styling is for the puppets. For Bella's puppet, she has bad hair and kind of not very nice jumper, and you think you kind of nailed this kind of slightly forlorn character just with those two things, and especially since the face, apart from the tooth, the face is just identical to everyone around them. It's just remarkable, the job they do.
And again, we've already mentioned it, but it's in Tom Noonan's performance of her as well. She's fully realised as a character, even though she has the same face and voice as everyone else. It's really clever. It's
interesting in the conversation with Bella. I think it's where your doubts about Michael's character start to creep in. Because, on sort of the grand scale, he's trying to reignite his passion about life because he's bored, but at the same time he is just trying to get some sex to kind of keep things.
And he's as oblivious now as he was a decade ago of the effect that his actions have had on her.
Yeah.
And the weight that she's had to carry around because of him just...
He's so
disappearing in the middle of the night.
Yeah, he's so self-absorbed in his own depression that he doesn't really understand his actions and how they affect other people.
She's pressing him, isn't she? Like, why did you go? Why did you leave? And he's just like, I've got psychological problems. I mean, everything sounds funny coming out of his mouth. And the animation on her face at this point it's incredible. Like, she's so expressive and very kind of liquid in her performance. Her eyebrows are going and her forehead is crunching and releasing, and you can see she's trying to process all of these emotions. It's
the kind of defensive body language as well. She's kind of held back and holding herself, so after his disastrous drink with Bella, he goes for a walk trying to find the toy shop that the taxi driver recommended to him.
It's nice seeing him stagger down the road a bit. Do you know what it reminded me of was the scenes of Tom Cruise walking in Eyes Wide Shut, where you get the nice
tracking shots.
Yeah,
along.
the side, profile tracking shot in a big city, and just to see the space that he's inhabiting, and it had that sort of authenticity about it, even though, again, I don't know how many times we should keep saying it's puppets and handmade miniature sets, but yeah, it's fantastic.
And then when he goes into the shop, there's that really nice sort of unsteady point of view shot.
Yeah.
Whereas he's staggering up.
It's great. He's
shop.
had a few drinks. He's losing focus. He's just blundered into a sex shop instead of a toy shop.
And in trying to find a toy for his son, he sees this antique Japanese sex toy on the shelf.
Yeah, it's a beautiful puppet, the Japanese automaton that he sees at the back of the sex shop. We don't know what becomes of it until the very end of the film, but it's definitely one of those moments where you have an animated character looking at a mechanical character within the internal logic of their world. It's just a really nice little moment of visual poetry, if nothing else, but it actually pays off really nicely at the end.
Then we cut back to the hotel room. You got some really nice... I mentioned it before. I really like the comedy stuff with the temperature in the shower.
yeah. It's really funny.
But then, we go straight from that within the same shot. You go straight from that to kind of, again, it's like puppet depiction of nudity. It's got with a correctly swinging penis as he gets out of the
testicles
shower.
And it's quite a surprise that, because you're watching him in the shower and it's a long shot and you get all the kind of jokes of him trying to hit the temperature and get it right, and then he's done and he steps out of the shower and you're watching it waiting for the cut and it just doesn't come and then he steps out and he's full frontal naked and you're like, wow, okay, that's interesting. But then that sort of very human scene with him struggling to hit the temperature, and then the very human depiction of his body is followed almost immediately by him wiggling his jaw.
Yeah, glitching.
And, that's it. And you start to get this kind of breakdown. The film could have gone in a completely different Spider-Verse direction at this point.
Some of the sound design, it gets quite ominous at this point, and it has in previous points in the film, and it suggests that you might be watching, something that's not quite, in this world, not in the real world. And it kind of skirts that line a bit. And I felt a little bit disappointed with that. I felt the film didn't need it. I'll come to it a bit more later on. I guess it works within the context of the film, because this is the point where he first hears Lisa's voice in the corridor.
Yeah, that's it.
How do you think those two things are supposed to coexist? The fact that it's Charlie Kaufman, and a lot of his scripts do have a science fiction element.
Yeah, doorways into Malkovich's mind and those kind of things. So you expect that kind of playing with reality and the layering of reality.
Yeah.
But we're already 2 or 3 layers removed from reality in something that feels intensely real. So I think he's already kind of tricked us at one point, and I think that it's maybe at this point in the narrative, it's just something to give us a little shock, to jar us into distrusting what we're seeing. Maybe also it's as simple as being a representation of Michael's state of mind, that he is just about to fall apart, can't hold it together any longer.
So at this point, Michael hears Lisa's voice in the corridor, and hurriedly gets dressed.
So funny watching a puppet rushing to put his clothes on.
But it did make me feel as kind of sweaty and uncomfortable as you would watching a live action person doing that.
Yeah.
Watching a real person do that.
It'd have been played so much differently, though, I think, because you're so vulnerable, aren't you? Naked, trying to get your trousers on.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I always get like a foot caught in my pants, and it does really fucking wind me up. I feel like there's some conspiracy between my underwear drawer and my place in the world, and it sort of captured that brilliantly. I've really empathised with him, like he was just desperate to get out of the room and thwarted by his own clothes.
I can't get dressed too quickly. I always feel deeply uncomfortable for a long time if I'm not dressing at the appropriate pace.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And if
you have like a metronome going.
Well, no, especially if you just go out of the shower. I have to cool down. I have to cool down properly before I can put my clothes on. Otherwise, I'll just continue sweating into my clothes, and that is wrong. So, just watching this, I thought it was quite pleasing that even watching a puppet do it made me feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So he goes herring down the corridor, knocking on different doors to try and find the voice that turns out to be Lisa. A lot of kind of very mildly amusing.
Yeah, that's it.
Responses.
You kind of don't want to spoil everything, but There's just every door that he opens, there's something wry about it. It's just a pleasure to watch.
And then he eventually finds the right door, which is Lisa and Emily's door. Before we start talking about Lisa, I have to say how much I fancied the Emily puppet.
Yeah, I know, it's really clever.
It's really seductive.
There's something about her eyes and the way
Yeah.
she sort of looks, and there's definitely something sexual about
Yeah,
her.
it's just kind of like, for a puppet
It's
to
her
exude
aura.
sexual availability.
Yeah, that's
It's weird. Yeah, so, and I felt that the Lisa character initially, for the first few scenes, felt a little bit overplayed for me.
Yeah,
A little bit caricatured, but I think it's a grower, and once you settle into it...
Yeah, but there's something about that, I think, that... Because as I was watching it the first time, I was like, oh, it's a shame she's, like, so vulnerable, but I think that's the type of woman that he's targeting.
Yes.
He is a bit of a predator. We've seen that already with Bella, so... For him to hear that voice, it's because he's able to target and seduce her.
His ears are pricked up at that.
That's it. It's like a tiger chasing a wounded deer. There's not much of a challenge there for him, especially because he is the legendary Michael Stone. It's an easy win for him.
So they decide to go for a drink. It's worth noting he does actually play on his reputation and how much they idolise him in order to get them to come for a drink.
Yeah, I mean, they're starstruck by him, aren't they? Can I take you two beautiful ladies for a drink? It's brilliant how dry his voice, because you can imagine reading the book as an American. You would read it with an American voice in your mind, so this idea that he just speaks with this dry northern accent is really good.
And so the three of them go for a drink. I thought what was really clever in this...
Oh, but wait, I'm going to jump in on you just because
okay.
It's got one of my favourite little throwaway gags when the waitress comes over to the table and just says hello again.
Yes.
To him. I think that's brilliant.
I thought the waitress was great.
Yeah.
Absolute no nonsense. It's kind of the waitress that you would like to meet.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to rephrase that. The kind of waitress that I would prefer to be served by.
Efficient and brutal.
Yeah, efficient, brutal, with character, but not
Yeah.
trespassing on my privacy.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought what was really clever with the drink with Lisa and Emily is one of the things that's described in, let's say, the audio play is that Lisa is disfigured, but you never see it.
Oh, I see.
So you're not sure as to the extent of it, but it's actually introduced in this scene before it's talked about. So you get to see her disfigurement. She's kind of hiding it with her hair.
Yeah, that's it. There's something around her temple, isn't there?
Yeah,
like
around
a little burn
one of her
or
eyes,
sort of scar or something.
But the fact that it's kind of brought up visually before it's brought up in conversation, I thought was quite clever. Yeah,
and there are a couple of like tiny clues to her backstory of how that happened. Something maybe to do with an long ago ex, and when he's trying to be all tender about it, she pushes away, and it's pretty much out the door until he pulls her back. Next, we see them drunk in the elevator, going back up to their floor. They have the weird sort of drunk people conversation, don't they? Talking about buttons and nonsense and
Emily discreetly kind of moving in on Michael.
Canoodling, isn't she? Wrapping her arms around his arm and putting her head on his shoulder. And they say goodbye in the hallway.
And then he kind of summons up the courage to ask Lisa to his room. And Emily's kind of disappointed, but, puts a brave face on it.
Yeah.
And
but Lisa keeps saying, are you sure you don't mean Emily? Because everybody fancies Emily, and like she's really insecure about that. I had a note that Emily says he's gorgeous when Lisa agrees to go to his room, which really made me laugh. And then as she's walking, she face plants, doesn't she? She walks and trips over her own feet and goes face down in the corridor.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's a good sort of slapstick moment. She's drunk, etc. But she does it later on as well. And I think there's something about just starting to hint that all of those quirks that people have when you meet them and you're drunk and you're in pursuit, and then the next day all of those becomes really annoying.
I mean, all of those things that seem charming through what we call beer goggles
are
less charming afterwards. I wondered if it was I'm possibly reading too much into it, but you got Lisa kind of tripping over and being kind of clumsy and vulnerable and injuring herself in the same way that Bella talks about. She talks about having fallen over and broken a tooth and that sort of thing. It's just this again. It's the same sort of character, isn't it? It's kind of clumsy.
That's his kind of his prey,
type.
Isn't it? His type.
And then you have the core of the film. Really, it's the lengthy section with Michael and Lisa in his hotel room. So I've got a note about them back at his hotel room. Michael's behaviour makes it clear he's done this before.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Yeah, he has kind of a load of rehearsed. It feels like.
he has some lines, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah. That's it. He's kind of in the pattern now.
Yeah, and whilst Michael's got he's got his chat up binds and he's watching her very closely, she's revealing even more vulnerabilities.
She's so open, isn't she? And just
Yeah.
trying to just like present herself as realistically as possible to him.
unvarnished
Yeah,
as
that's
possible.
it.
But she's going into how her previous boyfriend of 8 years ago was a man who was about 60 and thought she was
He
an
was
easy
married.
target.
Yeah, that's it.
It's
Is-
I mean, all this is the stuff that kind of deepens the character and makes it
Yeah.
less of a stereotype.
But I think she's obviously like vulnerable and has and is being preyed upon, but she's also like positive and trying to see the good in the world and
and trying to
she's
make the best of each
untainted
situation.
by whereas he's kind of just seems to be carrying this weight of his
Cynicism,
experience.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And she's kind of the counterpoint to that.
We have the drunken rendition of the Cyndi Lauper song, which I thought was unbearably sweet.
Yeah.
It was lovely.
You know what? I've heard that song like loads of times. I remember it being in the charts,
Mm.
and I don't think I've ever like really paid attention to the lyrics until I saw
Really?
Lisa Puppet in a film sing them, and just I was really touched by it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again another great gag where he thinks she's finished, and she just kind of picks up the back part of the song.
It's a godsend that apparently it was supposed to be, what's that horrible song from Titanic?
Where my heart will go on.
It was originally supposed to be that song, but they couldn't get the rights.
Oh yeah,
Which
yeah.
is-
That's a nice switch.
I like I've always liked that Cyndi Lauper song. I was a bit stunned to find that I don't have it in my iTunes anywhere. I've
I bet you do now, don't
never
you?
gone out. No, I've never gone out and bought it, but I've always liked it whenever it's come on.
Oh yeah, okay.
Even though it's like desperately uncool.
Mm. You
to
probably
say
had
that.
it on Now That's What I Call Music 3.
It actually probably is on that like 3 or 4.
It's somewhere around there, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I've always liked it. It's always like splashing cold water on your face whenever you hear it. It's quite refreshing, quite brassy. Yeah, and she kind of drifts from singing this song into a kind of sleepy sort of drunken reverie,
Mhm.
which is really lovely.
They're sort of thanking each other, aren't they? And
Mm.
it's really soft. It's like, and he's crying at this point as well, isn't he? It's obviously he's drunk, so it's
Yeah, and whilst in defence of the sexual predator, whilst he is kind of preying on her, he is also actually finding something of joy and worth in his miserable world.
yeah.
There is that to be said for him. So the sex scene is actually played quite straight, isn't it? I mean, it's one of the joys of this is that you're watching something that filmed in a wide with the occasional close-up would be quite mundane,
Yeah.
but just watching it played by puppets.
It's
again,
it's sort of captivating at first because you're like, okay, yeah, they've done nudity, they're going to do this, okay, they're going to do the full sex scene, and then you're just kind of watching it, and somehow you get the intimacy, you get this tragedy, they're desperate for a connection, the fact that they're disconnected from both of their own respective lives. I don't know, it kind of gives so much from a scene of two puppets having sex.
I was disgusted in the way that I'm disgusted watching human beings do it as well, when he automatically lights up after sex.
Oh yeah.
I think it's odd since the smoking ban in a lot of countries. I find myself watching films where people smoke and just wondering how bad their clothes smell.
yeah.
And when somebody books into a smoking room in a hotel, you think, I wonder how bad that smells in that room.
It's set in like 2006 or something, isn't it? Because I think, wasn't Bella's Letter like 1995 or 6 or something? And that was 11 years ago.
You got a George W. Bush photo
That's
on
right.
the hotel administrator's wall.
Yeah. And he does rant about the Iraq War at some point as well, doesn't
Yeah.
he?
Yeah, and the president being a war criminal.
Yeah, that's right.
So we go from the sex scene into the dream sequence
Mm-hmm.
in the film. I am ambivalent about this whole sequence, actually. If you wanted to be a bit smug about it, you could call it the Charlie Kaufman scene in capital letters.
Yeah.
And I felt that this was something that was written into it in order to make it more like a Charlie Kaufman movie, because the film doesn't need it. I mean, I know it's just a dream sequence, but it gives it that explicitly science fiction feel that you would come to, quote, expect from his movies. And I felt a little bit disappointed. I remember the first time I watched it, I felt as, so after all kind of like the beauty of this everyday stuff, we're going into this, are we? We're doing this. and I was very relieved it was a dream sequence. But
Yeah,
at the
that's
same
it.
time, I just don't think we need it.
No, you're right. You could do without it, but it does give us a very clear indication of the terror of Michael's subconscious. You know, this idea that everybody loves him and wants a piece of him, and he's got nothing to give. And yeah, I just think it's saying a lot about his state of mind, and it is still funny. You know.
Yeah, I mean it's really good. It's it's funny and it's scary and it's weird.
Yeah, it's the manager that he has to go and see when he's called down on the hotel telephone has some leprechaun fish. He says, "Look at their Irish faces."
And then
that's sort of madness, isn't it?
Inexplicably gets on a treadmill in the middle of conversation.
Yeah.
Which you don't really notice as strange at the time because you're so drawn into it all.
All those kind of quirks. It's like Kaufman's restrained up to this point and after this point by the discipline of the narrative. So here he's just like put all of his...
this is all my surreal bureaucracy nightmare stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
In one condensed dose. Yeah. Anyway, that was my gripe with it, and I guess with the Japanese sex doll as well. I felt, it doesn't sink the film for me. I just felt that as the simpler aspects of the film would support it anyway, without any of the weirdness.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you could definitely got away with just playing it straight.
Absolutely
it's
straight.
already super complicated, tons to kind of analyse on each level. So
oddly enough, having just complained that I feel this dream sequence doesn't fit in, I went back and watched 2 Charlie Kaufman movies again after this one. I watched Schenectady, New York, which I loved, and I went back and watched Adaptation, which I hadn't seen since it first came out.
yeah, I saw it at the cinema. I haven't seen it since.
I did not enjoy that at all at the time,
okay.
and I didn't enjoy it this time around either.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that I would like it more because it's the least fantastic of his movies. It doesn't have any science fiction elements. I mean, it has, Nicolas Cage's twin brothers, but there's no science fiction, no fantasy elements to it whatsoever. And I found that I still really didn't enjoy it.
Okay.
I was amused by it, and I was enjoying the way that the script kind of references itself throughout, and all the things that he was talking about happening in the script or shouldn't happen in the script were happening in the film. But at the same time, I didn't enjoy it very much, which is kind of contrary to what I've said about this one. I'm hoping this one will be more mundane and down to earth, and criticising it for having a fantastic dream sequence in the middle.
Yeah, quite like the music in the dream sequence. I feel like it's where we get our big flourishes. Maybe it was Carter Burwell's insistence that there was something, some big flourish of action and adventure. They're being pursued, aren't they? And all the other people in the hotel are telling him not to be with Lisa. Don't be with Lisa. She wakes him. She sort of pulls him out of the dream and says that he was thrashing around, which we've heard his kind of wife criticise him for. And when he's apologising, she says that it's okay, she liked it because there was something intimate about him elbowing her in the face during their it's like she's quick to forgive, to see the best in people.
Yeah, but despite that, they have breakfast together. They order room service and have breakfast and plan the day, and the inevitable happens.
Yeah. I mean, as an aside, this scene is one of the sort of most exquisitely animated
and lit as well.
Yeah. Just looking at the detail of scrambled eggs, it's sort of, I was definitely humbled by the craftsmanship on display here.
Yeah, and the gorgeous sort of bright early sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I remember watching this the first time, and I kind of saw this gradual switch over coming.
Yeah.
Just at the beginning of the scene, that it's going to happen, and yeah. But I found all the details of his impatience and disappointment particularly pointed and embarrassing, because we've all done that, haven't we?
Yeah.
Even with not to say that the person you're doing it with is fading from your life and is losing their charm for you, but we've all kind of picked holes in people's behaviour.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, of course, it's an easy kind of default setting. It takes so much more will to stay conscious of the respect and love that you need, and the tenderness, and to treat another person as themselves and not an extension of your own kind of neurosis, which is what he does. Yeah, he just drags her into his bullshit.
Yeah,
he's complaining about her clinking the
fork on her teeth. Which is...
And then she's talking with her mouth full, and then he asks her a question, and then she won't answer it because she's still chewing. It's just all those little traps that he's starting to lay for her and himself.
And without even a second thought, he's just kind of drifting back into himself now that he's had what he wanted. And
she talks about going to the zoo, which is where that nice line from the earlier scene and the billboard all pay off, because like that's the third time he's heard somebody say that the zoo is zoo-sized, and she's just kind of blending back into the background for him. He's talking about leaving his wife, and she's offering him advice on how to leave his wife. Once she eventually accepts that seems like he's genuinely wants to make this big decision, and then he's like, you're being a bit controlling, aren't you?
A bit controlling, don't you think?
It's really funny, a bit awkward and horrible at the same time.
But it's horrible. It's just you realise that he's so quick to revert back to form and to this horrible sort of lack of self-awareness and just kind of blithely.
There's no compassion, is there?
No.
To talk to other people like that.
Well, the thing as well, though, is that, I mean, whilst we're kind of loathing his behaviour, he is also desperately upset and disappointed by what's happening to him, and by the fact that he doesn't realise that it's all of his own doing, but he's upset and disappointed by the fact that he's losing that connection that he had, and it upsets him so much that his big motivational speech that he's booked in to do falls apart completely. Fell apart a little bit too much, I felt. Yeah,
sort of the weird asides, where he's talking about the Iraq War, and he's sort of goose-stepping up and down the stage. It sort of gets a bit Monty Python, doesn't it? Quite extreme.
Yeah, and I felt it didn't really need that breakdown. I felt he could be a little unnerved and stuff, but I didn't think it needed a full-on breakdown. I think he would have been subsumed within himself enough for it not to hurt him that much.
But then do you think what they're saying is maybe that him as a kind of guru, capitalist guru, that by living so deep in this world, it's not like he just skirts on the side of the kind of capitalist condition. He's
in the middle,
very much instrumental in
forward.
Yeah, exactly. That this is his kind of his just desserts almost. That he is disconnected from the real world because he's part of the capitalist machine, and he doesn't deserve the love and attention of the rest of us. And by being part of this corporate monster, eventually his soul is going to fragment and be crushed, and the rest of us will watch it happen.
It doesn't happen in the breakfast scene, but when you cut to Lisa,
she's got
in the audience, she's got the replicant face, isn't she?
Yeah, but she's still got a tear in her eye. You can tell it's her, which is really clever. Yeah. There's a really nice when he's talking about the Iraq War, somebody's like, "Save our troops!" You just hear it in the background with like Tom Noonan's voice again. It's just a really clever, loads of clever details.
So there's a bit of an ellipsis here. We don't have any big sort of awkward farewell scenes or anything. I think the implication is that Michael's just packed and left in a hurry.
You can imagine it.
He returns home to his wife and son, who have brought round a load of friends and family for a surprise party. Yeah. All these people, none of whom he recognises.
Who are you? They keep saying, "Who are you?"
Yeah, I guess it's just...
They make him jump, don't they, with the surprise. It's just one of those really funny, awful moments where the surprise, and he's like, "Jesus Christ!"
And his son comes bounding into the room, says, "What did you get me, Daddy? What did you get me?" What's the present? This grasping son. And the Japanese sex toy starts to come to life towards the end of the scene. Yeah,
there's a thing where his wife says, "Well, what's that coming out of it? Is that semen?" And he's just shrugging, isn't he? Like, "I don't know."
When I was doing some background on this and reading reviews and how it was received, I read this really strange analysis of this in a major magazine or paper. I wish I'd kept the link, where somebody thought that the Japanese sex toy was key to understanding the film, and that the semen leaking from it at the end was Michael's, and that he'd had sex with it. Beyond being kind of, what? I didn't really take it in. I wish I still had that link.
Yeah, I think I might have seen that. Maybe it was Sight and Sound?
I think it was Sight and Sound. It was
New York Times.
American. Yeah.
New York Times. Yeah, I saw that, and they were saying that maybe Lisa was a figment of his imagination, and that he just basically went back to his hotel room with the sex toy.
But they were really putting that front and centre as their theory about the film.
Well, I mean, there's something. It's not like in a live action movie where maybe a spontaneous decision by the art director puts something into frame that is maybe accidental or accidentally leading the audience to a conclusion, because this is so meticulously crafted that all of that is there for a reason. So I think you are supposed to scrutinise it and try and draw a conclusion from why an antique sex toy that's obviously been on a shelf for a long time is suddenly leaking semen when he brings it home.
Well, I don't think it's supposed to be actual semen. I always thought it was just like a liquid that it leaks as part of its function.
Yeah, maybe.
So we leave Michael at home, fully sinking into his despondency again, perhaps even worse off than he was at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, he just his kid isn't interested in the semen leaking sex toy.
No.
Goes out to play, and his wife, she does. There's a really tender moment where she's like, we do love you. She can see that there's something wrong with him. She's like, we do love you. We all do. And he's just like, oh, thanks a lot.
But we do get a lovely moment which actually takes us outside of Michael's world at the end of the film, when we get Lisa's letter. And I kind of get the feeling that this is filmed from an exterior kind of. We've moved outside of Michael's.
Oh yeah, because we see Emily.
Emily has her own face.
Yeah, she's got her own face on. Yeah, yeah. Do you like her more with her own face, or
a little less actually? Yeah, and we've kind of stepped outside of his delusion and get their point of view, and it's nice that Lisa's.
It's positive, isn't it?
She is herself. She's found the best in
it.
it.
And she's also survived her encounter with Michael. She's not like Bella, who's still carrying the weight of that. That's the end, right? That's the last shot. That's Lisa and Bella driving off. We hear it's a kind of a footnote, but when the Japanese sex toy sings its song, we hear another voice. That's the only other time we have a different voice. It's not Tom Noonan singing the song in Japanese.
That's true. I'm feeling even though I've done a fair bit of research for this, there's a big chunk of research that I've missed. I have to do later.
To do with Japanese sex toys, yeah. I'm sure you'll be Googling that for the next few hours.
Yeah. There's a nice little sound design note, which I didn't notice until it's pointed out in this Q&A. At the end of the film, after the music plays, there's a gradual kind of murmur of Tom Noonan crowd voices.
Yeah.
Rising up as very much like, as it was pointed out, like the voices that you get in a cinema as everyone's getting up to.
Yeah, that's it.
I thought that was a lovely little touch.
There's a few films that I think once they're done, the titles are rolling and it's finished, you just kind of sit up and go, what was that about? I mean, have you seen Enemy, the Denis Villeneuve?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me that was one of those where I was just like, wow, I like it. I'm not sure if I've got it. What was that about? And I kind of do the research and then look at it again, and this film is definitely like that for me as well. I felt very satisfied when it finished, but I wanted to look deeper into why it was made and what it was about. What's your kind of takeaway? What did you think it was about after you'd seen it the first time, before doing too much research?
I honestly took a very superficial view of it the first time I watched it, because it was just, for me, it was already bracketed as a Charlie Kaufman movie.
Sure.
So I was just seeing it as a Charlie Kaufman movie with, and it was more interesting, again, because it was animated. I thoroughly enjoyed it and then put it on the shelf, and then, hadn't come back to it until this. It was only, doing some research and thinking about it a bit harder that you kind of see a bit more of the depth of it. I mean, I kind of view it the same way as you. I'm still kind of bitterly disappointed that this hasn't led on to a second career for Kaufman, in the same way that the animated movies have for Wes Anderson.
Yeah, they're a nice kind of parallel, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about these animated movies for each director is that they're very much of a piece with all of their other work. It's all the same stuff, but it's just a different visual medium. And I really would have hoped to see more kind of, not just Charlie Kaufman movies, but more movies in this style.
Yeah.
Or more animated movies about real life. As there's another universe for me where this is a big hit, a big indie hit, and leads to more stuff like this. Because it's it's fairly low budget and you can make it and put it out there, but it's, even with a low budget, it seems it couldn't make its money back. So
yeah, it's really frustrating. I think there's kind of tons of reviews about it. It's
it was like a
film that lots of people talk about, and still I think online there is a sort of a small but intense fan base for it, and people spreading the word. And I think it's kind of important to.
Even at the time, it was like blanket rave reviews. It was apparently it was the Guardian's film of the year.
Oh really?
Yeah, there's an interview with Kaufman they published the following year, talking about it and saying that it was our film of the year. And it still didn't make an impression. It's it's desperately disappointing.
It's a tragedy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely is. It might be worth bringing up at this point the disparity between how the film was marketed and what the film actually is. Did you see the trailer at all?
No, I didn't actually.
It's quite something. It's got a big euphoric track in the background, an
Coldplay
instrumental
or something.
I is it Likey Lee?
Oh yeah, okay.
One of those sorts of tracks. It could be Polyphonic Spree or Coldplay or Flaming Lips or someone like that.
Yeah.
One of those big tracks, and it uses chunks of his motivational speech as if it was to be taken seriously, about finding, everybody has a soul, everybody has... It's about finding connections with people, and he uses the most heartwarming clips from the film, suggesting it's going to be this like quirky, animated, uplifting movie about people finding a connection. It's got none of this kind of depressive middle-aged man trying to siphon emotion out of previous connections. Mm-hmm. None of this despair whatsoever. Again, it's not surprising, despite amazing reviews, that the film didn't land with a major audience, because it's not what it was being sold as. I can understand, Paramount's marketing department trying to sell it as positively as possible. And Kaufman says in some recent interviews, the failure of this movie's made him reassess his position in the marketplace, because previously, he could go to Sony and not Sony Classics, not some little subdivision. He could go to Sony and make a film with Sony. But these days, it's basically, well, what would the trailer be like? How can we market it? If we can't make a funny trailer out of it, we can't make the movie.
Yeah. Well, that's the business, isn't it? It's kind of, that's what it's become. Have you seen any... I haven't seen these myself, but like Svankmajer or Quay Brothers, is it? Yeah,
but they're all about...
Are they all sort of more surreal?
Yeah, absolutely surreal. They're all about kind of creating strange dream worlds, which are nothing like reality. I'd say only the absolute strangest part of this, the dream sequence in Anomalisa, would compare to their work.
Yeah, I see.
And theirs is all very, very organic as well. It's all about, there's not a great deal of texture in this film because of the setting. Overt texture, and the Svankmajer and the Quay Brothers is all, rotting wood and stone textures and fabrics and that sort of thing.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, in terms of the film itself, I think it's right up there with Kaufman's other movies, and I think the animation's given it another element that makes it even more fascinating. I think it's a terrific film, and I'm actually, sometimes when you have to watch a film again and then watch it a third time, making notes and then do background research, it tends to kind of dry it out a little.
Yeah.
In this case, it's just refreshed it for me. I was watching it the third time with pen and paper and just still spellbound. But that is always kind of going to be slightly tempered by the fact that I'm very, very disappointed that it didn't reach the audience that it deserved. I think everyone who's seen a Charlie Kaufman movie ever should have seen this. All that wider audience. Audience that he reached with his other movies, he should have reached with this. And everyone who's been to see a Wes Anderson animated movie, because it's quirky and fun and the animation's terrific, should also have seen this for the same crossover reason.
Yeah, exactly. For me, when I look at Anomalisa, I'm in awe of the craftsmanship. It really is a staggering accomplishment, and like making the everyday world beautiful somehow in its setting. I love that detail.
Yeah, and it's the very everyday world. It's deliberately the drabbest setting you can imagine.
Yeah, the Fragile Hotel.
Yeah, and it makes it seem wonderful.
But also, it's really funny. It's not like a gag a minute, but you're kind of giggling all the way through it. At either the visual jokes or at the dialogue. But also watching it as a kind of middle-aged man who maybe looks away a little bit from the abyss. Instead of facing the existential crisis. I like it that a film is able to be exquisite and funny, and also look at depression and these other things, and kind of get away with doing all of it. It's a stunning accomplishment, I think, to kind of tick all those boxes, and they're boxes that shouldn't even be together. It's really clever.